Princess Amelia had always felt like a bird trapped in a golden cage. While her brothers and sisters seemed perfectly happy with their royal life, she dreamed of something different. At 25 years old, she was already causing headaches for everyone at the palace. The royal advisors called her difficult behind closed doors. Her mother, the queen, worried about her constantly. Every morning, Amelia would wake up in her beautiful bedroom and feel the same heavy feeling in her chest. She would look out her window at the perfectly manicured gardens and wonder what life was like beyond those tall iron gates. The other royals seemed content with their scheduled days filled with ribbon cuttings, fancy dinners, and charity events where they simply showed up, smiled, and left. But Amelia wanted more. She wanted to actually help people, not just pose for pictures. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Amelia was supposed to attend 3 different events: a museum opening, a lunch with foreign diplomats, and a charity gala in the evening. But as she sat in her sitting room, reading briefing papers that felt meaningless, something inside her snapped. She picked up her phone and called her private secretary. "Cancel everything except the hospital visit," she said firmly. Her secretary tried to protest. "Your Highness, the museum opening is very important. The foreign minister will be there, and—" "I said, cancel everything else," Amelia repeated. "And I want to go to the hospital alone. No big entourage, no photographers, just me and 2 security guards." An hour later, Amelia found herself walking through the corridors of St. Mary's Children's Hospital. She had visited hospitals before, of course, but always with a crowd of officials. Cameras flashing, and everything perfectly arranged beforehand. This time was different. The hospital staff seemed genuinely surprised to see her, and there was no red carpet or formal reception as she made her way to the children's ward. She heard a gentle voice coming from one of the rooms. Curious, she stopped at the doorway and peered inside. A tall man in a white coat was kneeling beside a small bed, talking to a little girl who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. The child looked scared, her eyes wide with worry. "I know. It sounds scary, Katie," the doctor was saying in the kindest voice Amelia had ever heard. "But think of it like this. Your body is like a garden, and sometimes gardens get sick. The medicine I'm going to give you is like magic water that helps gardens grow strong again." The little girl's face brightened slightly, like the flowers in my mommy's garden. "Exactly like that," the doctor smiled. "And just like how your mommy takes good care of her flowers, we're going to take really good care of you." Amelia watched, completely mesmerized. She had never seen anyone speak to a child with such genuine warmth and patience. At royal events, people always seemed nervous around her, even the children. But this doctor was completely focused on his young patient, making her feel safe and understood. The doctor stood up and turned, round nearly bumping into Amelia at the doorway. He looked surprised, but not starstruck. In fact, he didn't seem to recognize her at all. "Oh, hello," he said with a friendly smile. "Are you here for the volunteer reading program?" The children absolutely love story time. For a moment, Amelia was speechless. When was the last time someone had looked at her and not immediately known who she was? When had anyone ever assumed she was there to help rather than to be helped? "Yes," she heard herself saying, "I'd love to read to the children. I'm David, by the way, Dr. David Chen. I work here in pediatrics. Amelia paused, her heart racing. "I'm Amy." It wasn't technically a lie. Amy was her family nickname, though no one had called her that in years. David led her to a small reading corner where several children were gathered on colorful cushions. Some were in wheelchairs, others had 4 drips attached to their arms, but all of them looked excited to see a new face. "Everyone, we have a special guest today," David announced. "This is Amy, and she's going to read you some stories." For the next 2 hours, Amelia experienced something she had never felt before. She read fairy tales and adventure stories to the children, and they laughed and asked questions and treated her like any other person. When one little boy started crying because he was scared about his upcoming surgery, she instinctively reached out and held his hand. "You know what?" she said softly. "I get scared sometimes too. Everyone does. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what you need to do even when you're scared." David, who had been watching from nearby, looked impressed. "It's exactly right," he said. "You're really good with them." During his lunch break, David invited Amy to join him in the hospital cafeteria. As they sat with their simple sandwiches and coffee, Amelia felt more relaxed than she had in years. David talked passionately about his work, about how he had grown up in foster care and always dreamed of helping children who felt alone and scared like he once had. The hardest part, he said, taking a sip of his coffee, is dealing with all the bureaucracy. There are so many children who need help, but getting funding for programs, navigating hospital politics, convincing administrators to try new approaches, sometimes it feels impossible. Amelia found herself leaning forward, genuinely interested. What kind of changes would you make if you could? David's eyes lit up. Oh, where do I start? Better mental health support for long-term patients? More family counseling services? Expanded? Outreach programs for underserved communities? We could do so much more if we had the right resources and support. As he spoke, Amelia felt something stirring inside her, a sense of purpose she had never experienced during any royal engagement. This was real work, meaningful work that could actually change lives. What about you? David asked suddenly. What do you do when you're not volunteering at hospitals? Amelia's heart skipped a beat. I'm still figuring that out, she said. Carefully, I'm interested in social work, helping people. I'm doing some research right now. It wasn't entirely untrue. She was always researching various social issues for her royal duties. Their conversation was interrupted when Amelia's security team appeared at the cafeteria entrance, their serious expressions and dark suits immediately drawing attention. David looked confused as they approached their table. Your Highness, one of the guards said quietly. It's time to go. The words hit the peaceful atmosphere like a stone thrown into still water. David's expression changed from confusion to shock as he processed what he had just heard. Your Highness, he repeated slowly. Amelia felt her cheeks burning red. I can explain, ... But there was no time. The security team was already moving, creating a protective circle around her as other people in the cafeteria began to notice and whisper. David sat frozen in his chair, watching as the woman he had spent the afternoon with, the woman who had read stories to children and talked about wanting to help people, was suddenly surrounded by an official entourage as she was escorted away. Amelia turned back once to see David still sitting there, looking completely bewildered. The little girl from earlier, Katie, had come looking for her new friend Amy, only to see her being whisked away by serious men in suits. That evening, Amelia sat in her ornate bedroom, staring at herself in the antique mirror that had belonged 2 generations of princesses before her. For the first time in her life, she saw something different in her reflection. She saw someone who had spent an afternoon being exactly who she wanted to be. Not a princess, not a symbol, just a person helping other people. She thought about David's gentle voice as he comforted scared children, about his passionate plans to make healthcare better for everyone. She thought about the look in David's eyes when he had talked about his work, a look of pure dedication and love for what he did. She had never seen that kind of passion before, certainly not in the formal, duty-bound world of royal life. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Amelia made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, she would find a way to go back to the hospital. She would find David and explain everything. And somehow, she would figure out how to be Amy again, the person who could sit in a hospital cafeteria and talk about changing the world. But that single afternoon had planted a seed that would grow into something beautiful and complicated and absolutely life-changing. And now that she knew what that felt like, there was no going back to the way things were before. 3 days later, Amelia found herself standing outside St. Mary's Hospital again, her heart pounding like a teenager on her first date. She had spent those 3 days thinking about nothing but David and the children she had met. Every royal duty felt more meaningless than before. Every fancy dinner conversation seemed empty compared to the genuine warmth she had experienced in that hospital cafeteria. This time, she had come prepared with a better plan. She wore simple jeans and a sweater, clothes she had borrowed from one of the younger palace staff members. Her long hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore glasses she didn't really need. Most importantly, she had convinced her private secretary to help her create a cover story. I'm researching healthcare accessibility for underserved communities, she had practiced saying in the mirror. I'm a graduate student working on my thesis. When she walked into the hospital this time, nobody gave her a second look. She was just another young woman, perhaps a student or volunteer. The freedom of being invisible felt intoxicating. She found David in the same children's ward, this time helping a little boy learn to walk again after leg surgery. The child was frustrated, and tears were streaming down his face as he struggled. With his crutches, "I can't do it," the boy sobbed. "It's too hard." David knelt down to the boy's level. "You know what, Tommy? When I was your age, I couldn't ride a bike. All my friends could do it, but every time I tried, I fell down. I was so embarrassed." "What did you do?" Tommy asked, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "I practiced in secret," David smiled. "Every day after school, I would go to the park when nobody was watching and practice falling down. I figured if I got really good at falling, maybe I'd eventually figure out how not to fall." Tommy giggled despite his tears. "Did it work?" "It took 2 months," David said, "but eventually I stopped falling, and you know what the best part was? When I finally rode that bike in front of my friends, I wasn't just riding it, I was flying." Amelia watched from the doorway, amazed again by David's natural ability to connect with children. When Tommy successfully took 3 steps with his crutches, David cheered as if the boy had just won an Olympic medal. "Excuse me," Amelia said softly from the doorway. David turned around, and his face lit up with surprise and genuine happiness. "Amy, you came back." "I told you I was interested in healthcare," she said, surprised by how easy it was to smile around him. "I was hoping I could observe more of your work for my research." "Of course," David said enthusiastically. "I'd love to show you around properly this time." Over the next few weeks, Amelia developed a routine that felt more real than anything in her royal life. She would attend her morning obligations, the meetings she couldn't avoid, the appearances that were absolutely necessary, and then she would slip away to become Amy. She rented a small apartment under a false name, a tiny 1-bedroom place that cost more to keep secret than most people made in a year. But to her, it was priceless. In that little apartment, she learned to cook by watching online videos. Her first attempt at making pasta resulted in smoke filling the kitchen and the fire alarm going off. But David, who had started visiting her there, just laughed and ordered pizza instead. "You know," he said as they sat on her simple couch eating, "take out food. I've never met anyone quite like you, Amy." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? You asked the most interesting questions about healthcare policy? Yesterday, you were talking about international medical aid distribution. It's like you had inside knowledge of how government funding actually works. And sometimes you say things about social responsibility that sound like you've thought about it from angles most people never consider." She tried to play it off casually. "I just read a lot. I'm really passionate about these issues. That's what I love about you," David said. And the word love hung in the air between them like a beautiful, terrifying butterfly. "You care about things that really matter." Their relationship deepened slowly, naturally. David would text her funny stories about his young patients. She would surprise him with his favorite coffee when he was working late shifts. They would take long walks in parks where nobody knew to look for a princess, talking about everything from childhood dreams to plans for changing the world. One evening, they sat by a small lake feeding ducks. David told her about his childhood. "In foster care, I bounced between 7 different homes," he said quietly. "Some were okay, some were ... not great. But you know what I learned? Every kid deserves to feel like someone cares about them, really cares. That's why I became a doctor. Every child who comes into my hospital, I want them to know that someone is fighting for them." Amelia felt tears building in her eyes. "You're the most amazing person I've ever met," she whispered. "Amy," David said, turning to face her completely. "I know we haven't known each other very long, but I've never felt this way about anyone. Before, you make me want to be better, do more, reach higher. When I'm with you, I feel like I could change the world." That night, they shared their first real kiss under a streetlight outside her apartment building. It was soft and sweet and filled with promise. Amelia thought her heart might burst from happiness. But keeping her double life became harder every day. Her absences from royal duties were becoming more noticeable. Her mother had started asking pointed questions about where she spent her afternoons. Her private secretary was running out of excuses for why the princess needed so much research time away from the palace. The breaking point came during a quiet dinner at her apartment. David was telling her about his dream to expand pediatric mental health services when her phone buzzed with an urgent message. Her brother had been in a car accident, nothing serious. But all family members were required to return to the palace immediately for security reasons. "I have to go," she said, jumping up from the table. "Go where?" David asked, confused. "Amy, what's wrong? You look terrified." There's a family emergency. I can't explain right now, but I have to leave." She could see the hurt and confusion in David's eyes as she grabbed her coat and rushed toward the door. This was the third time in 2 weeks that she had suddenly disappeared without explanation. "Amy, wait," David called after her. "When will I see you again?" "Soon," she called back, hating herself for the lie. "I promise, soon." But as she sat in the back of the royal car speeding toward the palace, Amelia knew that her two worlds were colliding. She couldn't keep living this double life forever. David was starting to ask more questions, getting suspicious about her mysterious disappearances and her unusual knowledge about topics that seemed beyond her supposed background. More than that, she was falling deeper in love with him every day, and the weight of lying to someone she cared about so deeply was becoming unbearable. Every time he looked at her with those trusting, loving eyes, she felt like she was betraying not just him, but the authentic version of herself that she had discovered through their relationship that night. Lying in her royal bedroom that suddenly felt more like a prison than ever before, Amelia made a decision that terrified and excited her in equal measure. She was going to tell David the truth about who she really was. Whatever happened after that, whether he could accept her royal identity, whether they could find a way to make their relationship work despite the enormous obstacles, she owed him honesty. She owed herself honesty, too. Tomorrow, let's sit David down and tell him everything. She would explain about the crown she never wanted, about the cage of royal duty she had been born into, and about how meeting him had shown her what it felt like to be truly, completely herself. She just hoped that when she revealed her true identity, the man she had fallen in love with would still be able to see Amy underneath the crown. Amelia woke up that Thursday morning with butterflies dancing in her stomach. Today was the day she would finally tell David everything. She had practiced the conversation 100 times in her head, imagining every possible reaction he might have. She had even written down the main points on a piece of paper, though she knew she would be too nervous to actually read from it. She spent extra time getting ready, choosing a simple blue dress that David had once said brought out her eyes. She looked at herself in the mirror one last time. She whispered, "Just be honest. He loves you for who you are inside." But fate had other plans. Amelia was walking through the palace corridors toward the exit when her phone rang. It was David, and he sounded strange, confused, and hurt in a way that made her heart sink. "Amy," he said, and even just hearing him say that name made her feel guilty. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course," she said, stepping into an empty sitting room. "David, what's wrong? You sound upset." "I'm at the hospital," he said slowly. "I'm sitting in the break room, and there's something on the television that I don't understand." Amelia's blood turned to ice. "What? What's on television?" "There's a news report about Princess Amelia. They're saying she's been arranged to marry some Italian prince. They're showing pictures of her and Amy, double quotes." His voice broke slightly. "She looks exactly like you." "Exactly like you." Amelia sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to hold her weight. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. She was supposed to be sitting across from him in a quiet cafe, holding his hands, explaining everything gently. "The reporter is talking about how the princess has been avoiding her royal duties lately," David continued. "How she's been disappearing for hours at a time, and no one knows where she goes." "Amy, please tell me this is some crazy coincidence." The silence stretched between them like a canyon. Amelia could hear the sounds of the hospital in the background, voices, machines beeping, the normal sounds of David's world continuing while hers fell apart. "Amy." David's voice was barely a whisper now. "Please say something." "David, she finally managed to say, tears already starting to fall. I was going to tell you today. I swear on everything I hold dear. I was coming to see you to explain everything, so it's true. The pain in his voice was like a knife through her heart. You're Princess Amelia. Yes, she whispered. But David, please listen. To me, everything between us has been real. Every conversation, every feeling, every moment we've shared, that was all real. Real? David's voice rose slightly, and she could hear him moving, probably stepping outside for privacy. Amy or Amelia or whoever you are, nothing about this has been real. You lied to me about your name, your life, your entire identity.
Right.
Is Amy? She said desperately. It's what my family calls me. It's who I really am when I'm with you. David, please, can I see you? Can we talk about this face to face? Face to face? David laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean the way we should have been talking this entire time? You made me fall in love with a person who doesn't exist. I do exist. Amelia stood up, pacing the small room. The person you fell in love with, the woman who reads 2 children, who cares about healthcare, who burns pasta and cries at sad movies, that's me. That's who I really am underneath all of this royal stuff that I never wanted anyway. But you chose not to trust me with the truth, David said quietly. For months, you looked me in the eye and lied to me every single day. How am I supposed to believe anything you say now? Amelia pressed her free hand against the window, looking out at the gardens where she used to walk as a child, dreaming of a different life. Because you know me, David. You know my heart. You know how I care about people, how much your work means to me, how much you mean to me. Do I know you? David asked. Because the woman I thought I knew was a graduate student doing research. The woman I thought I knew didn't have bodyguards and a palace and an arranged marriage to a prince. The woman I thought I knew didn't lie to me every time I asked about her family or her past. The arranged marriage. Amelia had completely forgotten about the engagement announcement in her panic over David discovering her identity. David bowed. The engagement, that's not real either. I mean, it's real in the sense that it was arranged, but I'm not going through with it. I've been fighting it for weeks. I'm going to refuse. You're going to refuse? David's voice was flat, just like that. Yes, just like that. Because I love you, and I want to be with you, and I don't care what anyone else thinks about it. There was a long pause. When David spoke again, his voice was different, sadder, but also somehow distant. Amelia, he said, using her real name. For the first time, do you understand what you've done to me? I'm a foster kid who grew up with nothing. I work double shifts to pay off my medical school loans. I live in a tiny apartment and drive a car that's older than our relationship. And you, ... you're a princess. You live in a palace. You have more money than I'll ever see in my lifetime. None of that matters, Amelia said desperately. Money doesn't matter. Titles don't matter. What matters is how we feel about each other. But it does matter, David said gently. Not because I care about your money or your title, but because you let me believe we were equals. You let me tell you about growing up poor, about struggling to pay for college, about worrying whether I could afford to take you to nice restaurants. And the whole time you were living in luxury and pretending to understand my world, Amelia felt like she couldn't breathe. David, please. I do understand your world. Being with you, living as Amy, that was the realest I've ever been in my entire life. Maybe that's true, David said. But I fell in love with someone I thought was honest with me. I fell in love with someone I thought trusted me enough to share her real life with me. I fell in love with someone who I thought saw me as an equal, not as some charity case to play pretend with. You're not a charity case. Amelia was crying openly now. David, you're the most incredible person I've ever met. You're kind and smart and dedicated and everything I want to be. Then why didn't you trust me with the truth? The question hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. Amelia realized she didn't have a good answer. She had been scared. Yes, but David had shared his deepest fears and dreams with her. He had trusted her completely, while she had given him nothing but lies. I was scared, she whispered. Scared of what? That I wouldn't be good enough for a princess. No. Scared that you wouldn't want me anymore if you knew about all the complications that come with my life. Scared that you'd see the crown instead of me. Well, congratulations, David said quietly, because now I don't know which is the real you, the princess or Amy, and I don't think I can trust you enough to find out. David, wait, but the line went dead. Amelia stared at her phone for a long moment and slowly slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor. For the first time since childhood, she sobbed without caring who might hear her. She had lost the most important thing in her life, and it was entirely her own fault. Over the next 2 weeks, Amelia fought the arranged engagement with everything she had, but her heart wasn't really in it. What was the point of refusing to marry a prince she didn't love if she had already lost the man she did love? She tried calling David several times, but he never answered. She went to the hospital twice, but the staff said he had requested that she not be allowed in his ward. She even wrote him a 10-page letter explaining everything, but it came back unopened. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, she was sitting in her bedroom when one of the palace guards knocked on her door. "Your Highness," he said, "there's someone at the main gate asking to see you." "A Dr. David Chen. He says it's important." Amelia's heart stopped, then started beating so fast she thought she might faint. David was here. After 2 weeks of silence, he had come to see her. She ran through the palace corridors faster than she had ever run in her life. Not caring that her hair was a mess or that she was wearing yesterday's clothes, when she reached the main gate, she saw him standing there in the rain, looking small and uncertain next to the massive iron gates and stone walls. "David," she breathed. Not caring that she was getting soaked as she stepped outside, he looked at her for a long moment, and she couldn't read his expression. Finally, he spoke. "I've spent 2 weeks being angry with you," he said quietly. 2 weeks telling myself that everything between us was a lie. But then I realized something. "What?" Amelia whispered, afraid to hope. "The woman who held Tommy's hand when he was scared, who cried when little Katie had to have surgery, who stayed up all night helping me write grant proposals for the mental health program. That woman wasn't pretending. That was real." Amelia felt fresh tears start to fall, mixing with the raindrops on her cheeks. "I was wrong to lie to you," she said. "But I was never pretending about my feelings. Everything I felt, everything we shared, that was the most honest I've ever been in my life." David stepped closer, close enough that she could see the uncertainty and hope warring in his eyes. "The question is," he said softly, "are you brave enough to be that honest with the rest of the world?" David's question hung in the air between them like a challenge and a promise all at once. Standing there in the rain outside the palace gates, Amelia felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time in her life, she knew exactly what she wanted, and she was ready to fight for it. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger than she had ever heard it. "I'm ready to be honest with everyone." That conversation in the rain was just the beginning of the hardest months of both their lives. Within hours of Amelia's public refusal to marry Prince Alessandro, the palace phones were ringing non-stop. The Italian royal family was furious. British government was concerned about diplomatic relationships, and the media went absolutely crazy. By the next morning, photographers were camped outside the hospital where David worked. Reporters tried to interview his colleagues, his neighbors, even the lady who ran the coffee shop where he bought his morning coffee. Suddenly, the quiet doctor who just wanted to help sick children found himself at the center of an international news story. The headlines were brutal. "Princess dumps prince for commoner doctor. Royal love scandal rocks the palace. From rags to riches. The foster kid who stole a princess's heart." David hated every single one of them. "They're making me sound like some kind of gold digger," he told Amelia during one of their secret phone calls. "Like I planned this whole thing to get rich and famous." "Don't read them," Amelia advised, though she knew it was impossible not to. She was reading every article too, and each one felt like a punch to her stomach. The worst part was how they talked about David's childhood. Reporters had dug up records from his time in foster care, interviewed his old foster parents, most of whom barely remembered him. One particularly cruel article suggested that David was using his tragic backstory to manipulate the princess. "Thinking about leaving," David told her one evening. Sounded exhausted, defeated in a way she had never heard before. Leaving the hospital? Amelia asked, though her heart was already sinking because she suspected he meant something much bigger. Leaving everything. There's a position with Doctors Without Borders in Cambodia. I could disappear for a year, maybe 2. Let all this attention die down. Amelia was quiet for a long moment. Is that what you really want? Or are you just running away? Maybe both, David admitted. Amelia, this isn't fair to you either. What being with me is costing you. And he was right. The cost was enormous. Her mother, Queen Helena, had called her into the throne room for what Amelia would later remember as the longest conversation of her life. For 3 hours, they talked about duty, tradition, and the weight of the crown that would one day be Amelia's. Do you understand what you're giving up? Her mother asked. Not just the Italian alliance, but your entire future as you've always... No, Nate, I understand that I'm choosing love over an arranged marriage to someone I've never even met, Amelia replied. You're choosing love over your country's interests, the Queen said sharply. Over centuries of tradition, over the stability of the monarchy itself. The conversation got heated. Voices were raised. Ancient family arguments were dragged up and examined. Finally, Queen Helena played her final card. If you continue this relationship, you will be removed from the line of succession. You will lose your royal title, your income, your place in this family. Is this man worth losing everything for? Amelia looked around the throne room where dozens of her ancestors had made decisions that shaped history. She thought about all the princesses before her who had married for duty instead of love, who had sacrificed their personal happiness for the good of the kingdom. Yes, she said quietly. He's worth it. But more than that, being true to myself is worth it. The Queen's face went pale. Then you are choosing to abandon your family. No, Amelia said, standing up straighter. I'm choosing to be the kind of person this family should be proud of. Someone who stands up for what's right, who fights for love and honesty and real human connection. But the attacks weren't just coming from inside the palace. The public was completely divided. Social media was filled with people arguing about whether Amelia was being romantic or irresponsible. Protesters gathered outside Buckingham Palace, some supporting her choice, others demanding she do her duty. The worst moment came when someone leaked David's personal phone number. He started getting calls at all hours, some from reporters, some from people supporting them, but many from people saying terrible things about him and Amelia. After the 5th call threatening his safety, David changed his number and stopped going to his favorite places. I feel like I'm living in hiding, he told Amelia. This isn't the life I wanted. It won't always be like this, she promised, though. She wasn't sure she believed it herself. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. David had been working a double shift at the hospital when a tabloid photographer somehow got inside and started taking pictures of him with patients. Hospital security had to escort the man out, but not before he had gotten photos of David, comforting a crying child. The pictures appeared online within hours with the headline, Princess's boyfriend uses sick kids for publicity. David called Amelia that night, and she could hear that he had been crying. I can't do this anymore, he said. Today a photographer scared a 6-year-old cancer patient because he wanted pictures of me. The work I love, the children I'm trying to help, everything is being turned into a circus because of our relationship. Amelia felt her world crumbling. David, please. We can figure this out. How? He asked. How do we figure out a situation where being with me is destroying your family and being with you is destroying my ability to do the work I care about? We fight, Amelia said desperately. Keep fighting until people get bored and move on to the next story. And what if they don't move on? What if this is just our life now? What if every day for the rest of our lives we have to choose between being together and being able to do the things we care about? Amelia didn't have an answer for that. The next morning, David made a decision that broke both their hearts. He accepted the position with Doctors Without Borders. He would leave for Cambodia in 2 weeks. I need time to think, he told her when they met in a small cafe outside London, both wearing sunglasses and baseball caps like celebrities trying to hide. I need space to figure out if there's a way we can be together without destroying everything we both care about. And if you decide there isn't? Amelia asked, though she was afraid of the answer. David reached across the table and took her hand. Then at least we'll know we tried everything. That afternoon, Amelia walked through the palace gardens where she had played as a child. She thought about the little girl she used to be, the one who dreamed of adventure and true love. That little girl had gotten both, but she had never imagined how much they would cost. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. Whatever happens, these months with you have been the best of my life. You showed me what it feels like to be truly known and loved. Thank you for that. Amelia sat down on a stone bench and cried until she had no tears left.
Oh, yes.
Man she loved would be on a plane to the other side of the world. Her family was barely speaking to her. The media was calling her everything from a romantic hero to a traitor to her country. But as she sat there in the garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, Amelia realized something important. For the first time in her life, she was being completely honestly herself. She was fighting for what she believed in, even when it was hard, even when it hurt, even when she wasn't sure she would win. Tomorrow, she would make one final attempt to save both her relationship and her ability to serve others. She would go to her mother with a proposal that might just change everything, or might cost her the last remaining pieces of her old life. But tonight, she would sit in this garden and remember what it felt like to hold David's hand, to read stories to sick children, to be Amy instead of Princess Amelia, and she would decide, once and for all, who she really wanted to be. The morning before David was supposed to leave for Cambodia, Amelia woke up with a strange sense of calm. She had spent the entire night writing and rewriting a speech that would either save everything or destroy what little she had left. But for the first time in months, she felt completely sure about what she needed to do. She requested an emergency meeting with her mother. To her surprise, Queen Helena agreed immediately. "I've been expecting this conversation," her mother said, as they sat in the small private sitting room where the Queen took her morning tea. "You have something to say before that young man gets on his plane?" "I have a proposal," Amelia said, pulling out the papers she had spent all night working on. "But first, I need to ask you something. Have you ever been in love? Really? Truly in love?" Queen Helena's expression softened slightly. "Why do you ask?" "Because I need to know if you understand what I'm feeling, or if this is just about duty and tradition for you." The Queen was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the gardens. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, less royal, more human. "When I was 22, I fell in love with my bodyguard," she said quietly. "His name was Michael. He was kind and funny, and he made me laugh until my sides hurt. He also had no money, no title, and no political connections that could help the kingdom." Amelia's eyes widened. She had never heard this story before. "What happened?" she asked softly. "I chose duty," Queen Helena said simply. "I married your father, who was a good man and a suitable husband. We grew to love each other in our own way, and we had a good marriage. But Amelia... She looked directly at her daughter. "Not a day has gone by in 40 years that I haven't wondered what my life would have been like if I had been brave enough to choose love instead." The two women sat in silence for a moment, both thinking about paths taken and not taken. "I won't make that choice for you," the Queen continued. "But you need to understand what you're giving up. And more importantly, you need to have a plan for what you're choosing instead." Amelia spread her papers out on the small table between them. "That's what I want to talk to you about. What if I told you there was a way I could choose love and still serve the kingdom? What if I could keep my relationship with David and actually do more good than I ever could as a traditional princess?" For the next 3 hours, Amelia presented her plan. She had researched everything: legal precedents, constitutional law, examples from other modern monarchies. She had even contacted lawyers and policy experts to make sure her ideas were realistic. "Want to give up my place in the line of succession?" she said. "But I want to keep my title and use it to do real work. Not just cutting ribbons and attending galas, but actually making a difference. I want to work with David to create healthcare programs for underserved communities. I want to use my platform to bring attention to issues that matter." She pulled out newspaper clippings, research papers, detailed budgets, and timelines. She looked at what Princess Diana accomplished when she followed her heart and focused on causes she cared about. Look at how much more impact she had than if she had just stayed quiet and done what was expected. I could do the same thing. Queen Helena examined the papers carefully. You've really thought this through. I've thought about nothing else for weeks, Mom. I know this isn't the traditional royal path, but the world is changing. People don't want distant figureheads anymore. They want authenticity. They want royals who actually care about real problems and work to solve them. And David, have you discussed this with him? Amelia's confidence wavered slightly. Not yet. He's been so hurt by all the media attention, so frustrated by how our relationship has interfered with his work. I need to know that you'll support this before I can ask him to stay. The Queen stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the grounds where Amelia had played as a child. You know, she said slowly, when all this started, I was angry because I thought you were being selfish. I thought you were putting your personal happiness above your duty to the kingdom. But listening to you now, maybe I was wrong. Maybe. Choosing to be authentic, to follow your heart while still serving others, maybe that's exactly the kind of leadership this country needs. Amelia felt her heart start to race. Does that mean? It means, Queen Helena said, turning back to face her daughter, that if you can convince David to stay, if you can make this work, you'll have my full support. We'll announce your new role together. We'll make it clear that this isn't about abandoning duty, it's about redefining what duty means in the modern world. Amelia jumped up and hugged her mother tighter than she had since she was a little girl. 2 hours later, Amelia was racing through London traffic in the back of a taxi, clutching her phone and trying to reach David before his flight left. She had called the hospital, his apartment, even tried his old foster parents. Finally, one of his colleagues told her he was already at the airport. She made it too. Heathrow, with 20 minutes to spare before his flight to Cambodia, she found him, sitting alone in the departure lounge, looking tired and sad in a way that broke her heart. When he saw her running toward him, pulling a small suitcase behind her, his expression was a mixture of hope and confusion. Amelia, what are you doing here? Stopping you from making the biggest mistake of your life, she said, completely out of breath. David, I have something to tell you, and I need you to listen to the whole thing before you say anything. For the next 15 minutes, sitting in plastic airport chairs while travelers rushed around them, Amelia told David about her conversation with her mother, about her plan to redefine her royal role, about how they could work together to create something bigger than either of them could accomplish alone. You want to give up your place in line for the throne? David asked, looking stunned. I want to give up a job I never wanted for a life I've always dreamed of, Amelia corrected. David, these past months have been hard, but they've also shown me something important. When we work together, when you're helping sick children, and I'm using my platform to support healthcare initiatives, we can actually change things. We can make a real difference. David was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the announcement for his flight was beginning to board. What about all the media attention? The photographers, the reporters? It'll probably never completely go away, Amelia admitted. But it'll get better. And more importantly, we'll be using it for good instead of just enduring it. And your family? The palace? Amelia smiled. My mother told me something today. She said that maybe choosing to be authentic while still serving others is exactly the kind of leadership this country needs. David looked at his boarding pass, then back at Amelia. You're really willing to give up everything you've known for this? For us? I'm not giving up everything, Amelia said, reaching for his hands. I'm choosing everything that actually matters. David, I love you, but more than that, I believe in us. I believe in what we can accomplish together. The final boarding call for David's flight echoed through the terminal. So what do you say? Amelia asked. Ready to change the world with me? David looked at her for a long moment, then slowly tore up his boarding pass. I love you too, he said, pulling her into his arms, and yes, I'm ready. 6 months later, at a small ceremony that perfectly bridged their two worlds, Dr. David Chen married Princess Amelia in the hospital chapel where they had first met. The guest list included foster children David had worked with, patients Amelia had visited, members of the royal family. and healthcare workers from around the world. Queen Helena, watching her daughter dance with her new husband, was approached by a foreign dignitary who seemed curious about the unconventional match. "Your Majesty," the man said, "who is he? This doctor your daughter married?" Queen Helena smiled, remembering her own conversation with Amelia about love and duty and the courage to choose authentically. "He's the human she married," the queen replied. "They're going to do extraordinary things together." As she watched the couple laugh together, surrounded by people whose lives they had both touched, Queen Helena realized that sometimes the greatest act of royal duty is having the courage to rewrite. What duty means, Amelia had found her happily ever after, but more importantly, she had found her purpose. And in a world that often felt divided between tradition and progress, between duty and authenticity, she and David had proven that love could be a bridge between both.